And Cornpop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." My car, these were all public housing behind it. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, "I'll be waiting for you." He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There was a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was the mechanic. And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Come down here in the basement where all the pool filter is. You know the chain, there used to be a chain that went across the deep end. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, "You walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, 'You may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head.'" I said, "You kidding me?" He said, "No, if you don't come back." And he was right. So I walked out with the chain. And I walked up to my car. And they had, in those days, you used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in the rain barrel, get them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart then. I said, first of all, I said, when I tell you get off the board, you get off the board, and I'll kick you out again, but I shouldn't have called you Esther Williams. I apologize for that. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, "You apologize to me?" I said, "I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said." He said, "Okay," closed the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again. I came down here because I remember the first bumper sticker I saw that made me aware when I was in law school. "Proudly for Holloway. Proudly for your dad. First African-American state senator in the state of Delaware." Everything about. And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They'd look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. And I tell you what, the men, they're now all men, the guys I work with down here, and they're all guys at the time, they're all good men. Most of them made an awful lot of themselves. And Earl Larkin had a rough time. And some of you knew Earl. I came back as a public defender. I came back to Delaware and I got a fancy job with the oldest law firm in the state. But the city was burning. It was burning down here. And I couldn't do it. So I quit and became a public defender. And the first trial I had, I walked into court as a public defender with another guy named Eddie Sobosinski, a defender. I'd only been admitted to the bar 1 week. And Earl Larkin was in chains around his ankles and on his wrist, and they were chained together, so on a belt. And he said, "Who's going to try the Larkin case?" I just got started. And he was aptly named. His name was Judge Stiftel. And he said, Sobosinski said, "Well, that's my colleague. He just joined the public defender's office." He said, will you in fact defend him?" So he turned to Larkin and said, "He'll defend you." I said, whoa, Your Honor. I know nothing about the case. He said, "I'll give you it till tomorrow, but you draw the jury today." And he looked at Larkin and he said, "Do you mind if he represents you?" And I'll never forget what he said. I learned a lot. He said, and I mean it sincerely. He looked at me and he said, "One hunky's just as bad as any other. I'll take whoever you send me." And here's what I want to tell you about Earl. Here's what I want to tell you about the neighborhood and the heart. I defended him. He got beat up right on the other side of the field here. He walked along the tracks. He was a sailor in a sailor's uniform, the guy who he beat up and robbed. And so I thought he was innocent. I kept the jury out 5 hours, but they convicted him. And I felt so bad. So I go down to the old prison all the time. They had little wooden tables and two little chairs in a big dome you'd sit under where you'd be interviewed. And I was sitting there, Councilwoman, and the third time, saying, I'm appealing this case. And finally, he took the table, he flipped it up, and he said, jumped up, and the guards came and grabbed him. He said, don't you understand, Joe? I did it. I did it. But here's the point. He cared about me. This is a man who saw me bleeding because I saw this guy going to jail and I thought he was innocent. There's character, even in great problems. There's so much character in this neighborhood.